The glass sound shattered, echoed by the Henderson mansion, immediately followed by sharp screams and the noise of furniture being dragged. It was the third nanny in 2 weeks running towards the door, with tears in the eyes and a bag being hastily. "These children are impossible, diabolic," shouted Miss Patterson, still trying to take gouache paint out of blonde hair as he descended the stairs running. "I've never seen something like it. Is completely uncontrollable." From the top of the stairs, 3 pairs of mischievous eyes watched the scene with satisfaction. Sophia, Pedro, and Lucas, the 5-year-old triplets, exchanged complicit smiles while their latest victim abandoned the battlefield. It was the 10th fifth nanny in 8 months. Robert Henderson watched the entrance hall scene, exhausted and not knowing what to do. Widowed 2 years ago, the 38-year-old executive had tried everything, from babies with European diplomas to difficult children experts. Nothing worked. His children seemed to have developed a supernatural talent to make any caregiver's life a complete hell. "Dad can't even take care of us," Sophia muttered to the brothers, her little voice laden with a sadness that shouldn't exist in a 5-year-old child. "That's why he gets out of these strange women." From the kitchen, a delicious aroma of addled chicken was beginning to spread around the house. Maria Santos, the 48-year-old Philippine cook, discreetly watched through the door crack. Her dark eyes captured something that all the previous babysits had lost. Behind all that rebellion, 3 young children begged silently for someone who really cared. There was something in Maria's posture that differentiated her from all the other employees who had passed through that house. While the babysitters arrived with their diplomas and scientific methods, she kept watching, learning, noting small details that revealed the true nature of those seemingly impossible children. "Mr. Henderson," she said softly, approaching with a dish towel in her hands. Maybe I can try to help with the children this afternoon, just until you get another nanny." Robert stared at her as if she had suggested tamed wild lions. "Maria, you already do a lot of cooking for us. These 3 have managed to make a nanny with PhD in children's psychology to have a nervous collapse." "I know I don't have diplomas," Maria answered calmly, "but maybe that's exactly what they need. Someone who sees children, no problem solving." In the last 6 months working in that house, Mary had observed a pattern that none of the babysitters had noticed. The children were not cruel by nature. They tested each new person who entered their lives, desperately looking for someone who would not give up as their mother had done when he died. Robert hesitated. There was something in the calm and determined look of Mary who made him rethink. She had worked in silence in that house, always present, always taking care of the details that no one else noticed. His movements were soft, his always kind voice, and for the first time in months he glimpsed a spark of hope. "Okay," he said finally, "but if they do anything—" "They won't do it," Maria interrupted softly, with a confidence that surprised herself. What Robert didn't know was that Maria Santos carried powerful secrets, life experiences that no nanny with diploma could never match. She had raised 7 younger brothers in the Philippines after her parents died, had worked with orphanage, traumatized children, and had a maternal intuition that decades of study could not teach. While Robert climbed to his office, still doubting the decision he had just made, Maria headed for the stairs where the triplets watched her with curiosity and distrust. For a moment, the 4 stared at each other in silence. 3 injured children testing another adult who would probably abandon them, and a woman who kept in her heart more love and wisdom than anyone in that house could imagine. And if you are following this story of overcoming all prejudice, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because what happened below challenged all expectations and proved that sometimes the most unlikely solution is also the most perfect. 3 hours later, Maria found the triplets exactly where she expected, hidden behind the room, whispering over her next sabotage plane. She approached silently, observing the military strategy they had developed to defeat another caregiver. "This time let's put glue in her chair," Peter muttered, always the most creative on the mischief. "And then we pretend we don't know anything. Or we can hide all toys and say that in-law lost," suggested Sophia, her eyes shining with childish malice. Lucas, the quiet of the 3, shook his head. "What if she's the same as that shouted a lot? I didn't like it when she screamed." Maria noticed the vulnerability behind that rebel facade. There was fear there, real trauma hidden under layers of anger and constant tests. Instead of announcing or rebuking them, she simply sat on the floor beside them, causing a general fright. "So," she said calmly, "what's the plan to make me give up?" The 3 looked at each other, completely disconcerted. No previous nanny had sat on the floor with them, much less asked directly about their mischief with that almost fun tone. Won't you scold us?" Sophia asked, suspiciously. "Why do they plan to defend themselves?" Maria smiled softly. "When I was your age, I also made plans like that when unknown people tried to send me." Pedro frowned. "But you are an adult. Adults do not do mischief. Of course they do, they just get smarter on the mischief. Maria blinked at them. Want to know how I used to escape boring adults when I was little? For 2 hours, something magical happened in that house. Maria told stories of her own childhood in the Philippines, how she and her brothers created elaborate strategies to avoid housework or escape unpleasant visitors. The triplets heard, fascinated, finding that an adult could perfectly understand the logic behind his rebelliousness. Do you know why they do this with all the babysitters? Maria asked softly, as the laughter declined. Because they are boring, said Peter automatically. No, Maria shook her head. You do this to make sure they don't leave when they really need it, like Mom did. The silence that followed was deafening. 3 pairs of eyes filled with tears that had been dammed 2 years ago. Lucas was the first to collapse, followed by Sofia, and finally Pedro, the gang leader, gave way and started crying too. Mary hugged them, all at the same time, whispering in Tagalog words of comfort they did not understand, but that their hearts immediately recognized as genuine love. For 15 minutes she simply grabbed them as they discharged 2 years of pain, fear, and abandonment. When Robert came down to see if his house was still standing, he found a scene that left him paralyzed. His 3 impossible children were sleeping quietly on the couch, nestled against Maria as chicks looking for warmth. The television was linked to an educational channel, and on the coffee table there were 3 empty dishes, evidence that the children had eaten without drama for the first time in months. How did you get it? He whispered incredulously. Mary looked at him with eyes that kept decades of maternal wisdom. They just needed anyone to understand that behind every mess there is a lot of pain. Children are not born bad, Mr. Henderson. They only react to what they feel. But the other babysitters saw problems to solve. I saw children asking for help from the only way they knew. Robert felt something moving in his chest, a mixture of gratitude, relief, and something he hadn't felt for a long time. Hope. For the first time since the death of his wife, his children seemed normal. They looked like real children, not small, traumatized monsters. That night, after Maria put the triplets in bed, no screams, no negotiations, no drama, Robert found her in the kitchen, finishing preparing dinner as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Mary, he said hesitantly, you saved my family today. I don't know how to thank you. She smiled, continuing to season the adobo. It's still early to celebrate, Mr. Henderson. Tomorrow they will test if I will still be here, if I will still be patient, if I will still understand them. The real battle has not started yet. What Robert didn't know was that Maria Santos carried much deeper secrets than he could imagine. While seasoning the meat with the accuracy of those who fueled 7 hungry mouths for years of extreme poverty, she silently planned how to turn 3 injured children into future leaders who knew they could become, against all probabilities and prejudices that would still come ahead. In the following weeks, something extraordinary began to happen at Henderson Mansion. Maria not only kept the triplets under control, she was turning them into completely different children. But this transformation has not gone unnoticed by all the eyes of the rich neighborhood. Robert, are you sure it is appropriate to leave a maid to take care of children that way? Asked Victoria Ashworth, wife of Robert partner Durant, and a dinner at the club. I mean, she doesn't have formal qualifications, right? Robert felt the weight of the silent judgment around the table. Country Club was an environment where appearances and social status imported more than real results. Children have never been better, Victoria. For the first time in 2 years they are happy and balanced. But think about them, Victoria insisted, lowering her voice conspiracily. They need to learn to behave properly in our society. A Philippine cook may even be affectionate, but can she teach label, prepare for Harvard, teach about investments and networking? Charles Whitmore, club president, leaned forward. Robert, hire a European nanny. Someone with appropriate credentials. I can recommend an excellent agency. They provide caregivers for the best families in Manhattan. During this time, Mary watched everything in silence. She realized the condescending eyes of the neighbors when she took the children to the park, listened to the mother's whispers when waited in the private school line. For them, she was just the maid who was extrapolating her limits. What these privileged people did not know was that Maria Santos had an MBA in business administration from the University of Filipinas and had managed a chain of family restaurants before the economic crisis that destroyed family businesses. She had chosen to work as a maid in the United States not for lack of qualification, but for financial despair after the death of her father and the accumulated medical debts. Maria, Robert called her an afternoon, clearly uncomfortable. I need to talk to you about something delicate. She stopped preparing the children's snack, her heart accelerating. It had gone through this before, the moment when employers began to give in to social pressure. Some people have concerns about their lack of formal credentials to take care of children. Perhaps we should hire someone with pedagogy training to work with you. Maria nodded calmly, but inside she felt a familiar mix of anger and determination. Of course, Mr. Henderson. What do you think better? That night, after the children slept, Maria did something she had not been doing for months. He called her sister Carmen in Manila. "I need you to send me my diplomas and certificates," he said in Tagalog. "It's time to show these people who I really am." While waiting for the documents to arrive by the post office, Maria began to subtly implement advanced lessons with the triplets. She taught them basic mathematics through culinary recipes, geography through stories about different countries, science through simple experiments with kitchen ingredients. "Aunt Maria, why do you know so many things?" Sophia asked one afternoon, impressed by a lesson about volcanoes that Maria had turned into a practical experience using baking soda. "Because I learned that knowledge is the only thing no one can take from us little," Mary answered, smiling sadly. The decisive moment came when Victoria Ashworth brought her expert, a French woman called Mademoiselle Dubois, with a diploma from Sorbonne and impressive credentials. She arrived at Henderson's house wearing a flawless suit, carrying a leather paste and speaking with an accent that sounded pretentious to the privileged ears of that neighborhood. So you are the cook," said Dubois to Maria, barely disguising the disdain. "I'm sure you did your best with your limited experience." Maria smiled politely, observing while the expert tried to implement rigid methods with the children. In 2 hours, Sophia was crying, Pedro refused to cooperate, and Lucas had hidden under the table, exactly the behavior that had not happened for weeks. "These children need rigorous discipline," he declared Dubois to Robert. They were very spoiled by informal methods. It was at this moment that Maria made a decision that would change everything. She climbed to her room, opened the drawer where she kept her personal documents, and took a folder she hadn't opened 2 years ago. Inside was the evidence that Maria Santos was not just a cook. She was a woman who had built a culinary empire in the Philippines, formed in 2 universities, talking about 5 languages, and who had chosen that work for the sake of children, not for lack of options. As he walked back to the room where Dubois kept failing spectacularly with the triplets, Maria knew she was about to turn the game in a way that none of those prejudiced snobs could never anticipate. The submissive cook was about to reveal herself as much more powerful, a woman who had faced real adversities and knew exactly how to transform underestimation into overwhelming victory. "Sorry to interrupt," Maria said calmly, entering the room with a folder in her hands, "but I believe there are some important information that everyone should know before making any final decision about children's education." Robert, Victoria, and Mademoiselle Dubois became surprised. The Philippine cook that they had spent disqualifying weeks was there, with a strangely confident posture that none of them had noticed before. "Maria, it is not necessary," Robert began, embarrassed by the presence of the neighbors. "In fact, Mr. Henderson, I think it is." Maria opened the folder and removed several documents. "Mademoiselle Dubois, you said my qualifications are limited. I would like to see my MBA in Business Administration from the University of Philippines." The silence in the room was deafening. Victoria Ashworth almost choked on tea while Dubois paled visibly. Maria continued, her voice keeping the tone respectful but relentless. "Or maybe you prefer to see my Certificate of Specialization in Child Development from the University of Melbourne. I studied for 2 years through distance education while managing a chain of 5 family restaurants in Manila." She put more documents on the coffee table. "Here are the certificates that prove my fluency in 5 languages. Tagalog, English, Spanish, Mandarin, and French. I can continue the conversation in any of them if you prefer." This is impossible," Victoria murmured, taking the documents with trembling hands. "You are just one what? Mrs. Ashworth?" Maria interrupted softly. "An immigrant? A domestic? Someone you assume to be ignorant based on my current origin and work?" Robert was completely dirty. In 6 months working at her home, Maria had never even mentioned one of those extraordinary qualifications. "Why did you never tell me about it?" he asked. Maria smiled sadly. "Because I learned that in this country, even with all these diplomas, I would still be seen as just the Philippine maid. I preferred to let my work talk for itself." Mademoiselle Dubois tried to recover control of the situation. "Diplomas are important, but practical experience with children from our social class is different." "Our social class," Maria repeated, arising an eyebrow. "Mademoiselle, I managed business that generated more revenue in a year than many families in this neighborhood earn in a decade. The only reason I was working as a domestic is because I chose to start from scratch in the United States to give my family a better life." She turned to Robert, her eyes shining with a determination he had never seen. "Mr. Henderson, can I show the educational results of your children in the last 2 months?" Maria removed detailed graphics from the folder showing the academic and behavioral progress of the triplets. "Sophia has advanced 2 levels in mathematics. Pedro is reading at the level of 2 years older children. Lucas has completely overcome his social anxiety and now leads group projects at school. Victoria examined the documents with increasing embarrassment. But this means, Mary added, that you spent weeks trying to replace the most qualified person to take care of these children with someone whose only differential was born in Europe and talking to an accent that you consider sophisticated. Dubois tried a last desperate card. Even so, I have connections with the best preparatory schools. Me too, Maria answered calmly, removing more documents from the folder. Here's my correspondence with the Harvard, Yale, and Stanford admission directors. I keep regular contact with them through the alumni network of the University of the Philippines, who occupy important positions in these institutions. Robert held the papers, unbelieving. The letters were dean and directors of the most prestigious universities in the country, all directed to Dr. Maria Santos and discussing educational strategies for gifted children. Do you have PhD? He asked, his bad voice above a whisper. In educational psychology, Maria confirmed. My thesis on cognitive development in multilingual children was published in 3 international academic magazines. Victoria Ashworth seemed to have been scrutinized physically. Mademoiselle Dubois discreetly collected his own documents, which now seemed ridiculously inadequate compared to the extraordinary curriculum that Mary had revealed. There is one last thing, Maria said, taking her phone. I would like everyone to hear something. She reproduced a recording of a telephone conversation between Victoria and Charles Whitmore, arguing how get rid of the maid before she gave it, and put that Philippine in her place. Victoria's face was red with shame and anger. Have you recorded us? This is privacy invasion. It is documentation of racial and labor discrimination, Maria corrected. And it will be very useful in the process that my lawyers are preparing against you. Robert was looking at Maria as if she first saw her. The humble woman he knew had become a force of nature, someone who not only had impressive credentials, but who had tolerated months of disrespect while silently planned his full vindication. Maria, he finally said, forgive me. We were terribly unfair to you. She nodded gracefully. Forgiveness is possible, Mr. Henderson. But first some changes need to happen. Starting with these people leave my house. My house. The words echoed through the room like thunder. Maria Santos had claimed her place not as a tolerated maid, but as the highly qualified professional who always was, and no one would dare to question her authority or competence. 6 months after the great revelation, as the triplets had baptized that epic day, life in the Henderson mansion had completely transformed. Maria was no longer just the cook. She was officially the family educational director, with a salary compatible with her extraordinary qualifications. Aunt Maria, can you help me with this calculation problem? Sophia asked, now one of the best students of her class. The girl who once terrorized babysitters was preparing for state math competitions. Of course, honey, Maria said, sitting at the kitchen table that had become the most effective learning center that this house had ever known. Pedro, Lucas, do you also want to participate in the review? The 6-year-old triplets had become examples of behavioral and academic excellence at the city's most prestigious private school. His teachers often asked Robert about the revolutionary methods he was using at home. Victoria Ashworth never managed to look at Maria without lowering her eyes, embarrassed. His attempts to join again to the Henderson social circle were politely declined, and his reputation on the country club had been permanently stained when the story spread through the elite circles. Mademoiselle Dubois returned to France after discovering that no respectable family within 500 kilometers was willing to hire their services after the recording of their prejudice statements leaked on local social networks. Maria, said Robert one morning, finding her preparing the special triplets of triplets, a tradition she kept despite now having an assistant to help with basic household chores. I received an interesting call yesterday. Oh, yes? She asked, continuing to cut fruits in fun formats, something the kids loved. Harvard University wants you to minister a lecture on innovative educational development for multilingual children. It seems that your research has come to the listeners of the right people. Maria smiled, remembering the months when she had been seen as only the maid. And do you know what's funny, Mr. Henderson? I always had these qualifications. The only thing that has changed was that now people see me beyond their own prejudices. The triplets ran down for breakfast, as they did every morning, but now their morning hugs in Mary were different. It was no longer the desperate hugs of children seeking stability. They were the loving hugs of safe and loved children. Aunt Maria, said Lucas, always the most philosophical of the three. Yesterday at school, the teacher asked what our greatest hero was. I said it was you. Why, dear? Because you have taught us that no matter what people think about you at the beginning, what matters is who you really are inside. Robert watched the scene with a smile on his face. Mary had saved much more than her children's behavior. She had saved the soul of that family, teaching them lessons about prejudice, judgment, and the true measure of human value. 2 years later, Maria opened her own school of educational development, speech in children of immigrant and multilingual families. The establishment, located in an elegant building in the city center, had a golden sign at the entrance, Dr. Maria Santos Educational Institute, where the potential finds opportunity. Victoria Ashworth spent school one morning, watching the happily playing kids playing in the courtyard under the loving supervision of Maria. For a moment, his eyes met through the glass. Maria nodded politely, a gesture that carried forgiveness but also a memory. Never I can be based on appearances or origins. Robert often took fellow executives to know the school, proud to tell how he had almost lost the best educator his children could have had because of prejudice he didn't even know he had. The most valuable lesson I learned, he told visitors, was that competence and wisdom do not come with specific accents or diplomas from countries considered superior. They come from the heart, the real experience, and the genuine commitment to what is done. The triplets, now bright and balanced teenagers, continued to visit Mary every weekend. She had become much more than a caregiver. It was the second mother who had proven that family is built with love, patience, and mutual recognition, not birth documents. Maria Santos had begun that journey as an undervalued immigrant, working in silence while judged by her origin. It ended as one of the most respected educators of the city, owner of a prosperous institution, and mentor of hundreds of families who have learned to value competence about prejudice. True revenge was not to humiliate who underestimated it. It was to build something so grand and inspiring that its achievement spoke louder than any word of rematch could ever speak. And if this story of overcoming has touched your heart, be sure to subscribe to the channel to discover more stories that prove that the greatest triumph is to turn contempt into fuel to achieve the greatness that has always been within us.